Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All thanks and praises are due to Allah, and prayers and blessings be in our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Welcome back, my beloved brothers and sisters, to a new dars from our series, Scenes from the Life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're back, alhamdulillah. It's been a while, but we're back. Inshallah, I will try my best to balance between the series of glad tidings to the believers and the series of scenes from the life of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. It's going to be a struggle to balance between those, but I will try my best, inshallah. So let us start, ala barakatillah. As we see in our modern times and what's going on in the world, we see that the aggression on Gaza and Palestine has been going on for around 90 days. And as Muslims, and as we see also of non-Muslims, all of us are astonished and amazed how the people of Gaza are making sure that they always are patient. They're always thanking Allah Azza wa Jal for what's going on with them and the things that they are facing every single day. These tribulations have been a test for them and the Ummah to see how they are doing in this tribulation. And subhanallah, Allah Azza wa Jal is showing us their belief, is showing us how they're steadfast on the deen. But when we see this, we know that this is not coming from blank. This is not coming from nothing, but rather they're following a specific path, a path that someone has followed 1400 years ago. This path is the path of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam has been known for his steadfastness on the deen, has been known in his characteristics that he always made sure that he was firm on the deen, that he was firm in delivering the da'wah of Islam to non-Muslims, in delivering the da'wah to the people that associated partners with Allah Azza wa Jal. So inshallah in this dars we will see different scenes from the life of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, where he showed us how he was firm and steadfast on his deen. Incident number one, we see how the closest people that were to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, they were his enemies, his rivals. They made sure that whatever they had in their hands, they were to attack the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and to attack the companions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and to attack Islam, the new religion that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam have come with. But we see the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam how he was steadfast on his deen. And from these people were his uncle, Abu Lahab. His uncle was one of the worst people in the city of Mecca, where he persecuted him personally and persecuted other peoples from the companions. He made sure that to show everyone, the people of Mecca and the visitors of Mecca, that the Prophet ﷺ was to be left off, was to not talk to him and see what he has. He used to go around the city of Mecca behind him when he calls towards the da'wah of Islam. He used to go and tell people, I am his uncle. I know who he is. I know that he shouldn't be followed. Neither you should follow him. I myself have not followed him, so why should you? And he used to throw stones on the Prophet ﷺ to make him go back to his home instead of delivering the da'wah that he should deliver to the people. Another example of how Abu Jahl, his name was Abu al-Hakam, but because of how ignorant he was called the father of ignorance. He was called Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl have tried multiple times to make the life of the Prophet ﷺ miserable, have tried to persecute the Prophet ﷺ, but failed. One of his times, he saw the Prophet ﷺ in sujood, in prostration towards the Kaaba, facing Allah Azza wa Jal in salah. He saw him praying in front of everyone in Mecca, but yet he wanted to stop him and make him not complete his prayer. He told the people around him that I will go and step on his head, his beloved head alayhi salatu wasalam. He was going to step on his head. But what Allah Azza wa Jal did, that when he was coming towards this act, Allah Azza wa Jal sent in the angels, and there is different narrations whether He sent Jibreel alayhi salam or other angels to protect the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And Allah Azza wa Jal has made a border of fire between Abu Jahl and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And Abu Jahl went back scared to his companions, and they asked him, why you didn't do what you said you're gonna do? But he told them that I've seen what I've seen, and I would never do such a thing when I've seen what happened. Another incident where it was narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari on the authority of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhu. And it was also narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was once also praying and in prostration. And Oqbah ibn Abi Muait, one of the worst on the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in the city of Mecca, he was his enemy. And what happened is, at the time, they had slaughtered a camel so they can use it to eat and use it for different uses, use its skin for clothing. And what happened is, they took the abdominal content of the camel, and while the Prophet ﷺ was in sujood, in prostration, they put that content on his back and on his head ﷺ. But he was steadfast in his deen, and he was steadfast in his salah. He did not leave his salah to go fight them off. He did not leave his salah to see what they're doing, but rather he continued his prayer. And while he was in his prayer, they put that on top of him. And then Fatima, his daughter, radiyallahu anha, she went to the Prophet ﷺ and she took all of these stuff away from the Prophet ﷺ. This is one example to see how the Prophet ﷺ was steadfast in his deen. Another example narrated by Al-Bayhaqi in his book Dalail al-Nubuwah. What happened is, Abu Talib, his uncle, the one that made sure to always protect his nephew no matter what, he went as a rival in front of the whole city of Mecca to protect his nephew and his son, because he considered the Prophet ﷺ as his son, as he had a major role in raising up the Prophet ﷺ. And what happened is, the leaders of Mecca have went to his uncle, to Abu Talib, and they have spoke to him and told him that we want your nephew to stop his da'wah, to stop saying what he's saying. And Abu Talib have tried multiple times to talk to them in a sweet way, to make them stay away from attacking his nephew, from injuring his nephew, from saying bad stuff about his nephew. But then, after a long time, they were enough with it. They wanted Abu Talib to make an action against his nephew. And when Abu Talib have heard this, he went back to his nephew, to the Prophet ﷺ, and he have told him that I have tried my best, but you're seeing what your people have said. You've seen what Quraysh have said about you. You've seen what they want you to do. Please stop this da'wah, stop this preach that you're trying to do, and save me and save yourself. And when the Prophet ﷺ have seen the hesitation that his uncle is having, what he did is, he told his uncle, "Oh uncle, if they put the sun in one hand and they put the moon in the other hand of mine, I would not stop preaching this new da'wah. I would not stop the da'wah except that Allah Azza wa Jal makes this da'wah victorious, or I die serving this cause." And when Abu Talib have seen how his nephew was steadfast on this path, he told him, "Do whatever you want to do, and I will keep protecting you until either I'm killed or I pass away." And he read a poem at the time explaining these deep values that he wanted to show the people of Quraysh, that he is protecting his nephew no matter what. We see how the Prophet ﷺ is steadfast on his deen no matter what. Ibn Kathir narrated in his book of history called Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, a story about Otbah ibn Rabia. Otbah ibn Rabia was from the leaders of Mecca, from the leaders of Quraysh. And after they have tried multiple and numerous ways of stopping the Prophet ﷺ, he came up with an idea. And he said, let me go to talk to Muhammad ﷺ and see if I can give him a way of getting out of what he's doing. To give him an opportunity to take. To give him an offer. But let's see what the Prophet ﷺ did to him. When Utbah came to the Prophet ﷺ, he told the Prophet ﷺ that you have come to us with this new religion. You have severed the bonds that we have. You've been talking against our gods. You've been talking against our idols. You've been talking to the small kids. You've been talking to the slaves. You've been talking to the people that are in Mecca. And they're turning against us. But we want to finish this off. And we want to present you with an opportunity for you to take and leave this new da'wah, this new preach that you're trying to do. And the Prophet ﷺ respectfully have told him, you can present what you have. So the man, Utbah ibn Rabia, he started speaking and he said, if you're doing all of this for money, then all of us will share in and we will pull in to make you the richest in the city. If you're doing this in order for you to be a leader, then we will not do a single thing in Mecca except that we ask you for help. And we ask you to be the leader of us in doing that thing. If you're doing this to be a king, then we will make you a king. If you're doing this because you're ill, there is something going on with you, we will make sure to bring in the best of doctors to cure you. And we will spend the money in this cause. And there is other narrations saying that if you're going after this for women, then we will bring in the best of women, the most beautiful of women, and we will let you marry 10 of them. And after the Prophet ﷺ have heard what Utbah has offered him, the Prophet ﷺ told him respectfully, have you finished your offer? And the man said, yes. And then the Prophet ﷺ started to recite from the Quran, from the words of Allah Azza wa Jal. He started to recite from the surah of Fussilat. And he recited the first couple of ayat from that surah. And this surah specifically, in the beginning of it, it talks about how the people of a prophet, how the revelation comes to the people, yet they refuse it. And then what happens to them after the refusal? The punishment that comes to them. And when Utbah was listening to this, and the Prophet ﷺ reached to the ayat of punishment, it was narrated in different narrations that he started putting his hand on the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ so he can stop completing what's going on. He can stop reciting what Allah Azza wa Jal has bestowed upon him from the revelation. And he left him. And he went back to his people, to the leaders of Quraysh. And he told them, leave this man off. Stop doing what you're doing. Stop persecuting this man. Because what he is saying is not poems, is not the word of man, but it's something else. He knew that the words of the Prophet ﷺ was not from him, but rather they were from Allah Azza wa Jal, his Lord and our Lord. Another narration and another story where Imam al-Tirmidhi narrated in his Sunan, and Shaykh al-Albani said that it is authentic, where the Prophet ﷺ says that when we were persecuted and we were made to stay at the Shab of Bani Talib, the Shab of Bani Hashim, the family and the relatives of the Prophet ﷺ were put to stay in a specific neighborhood in Mecca, and a siege was held on them for 3 years. And the Prophet ﷺ is explaining in this hadith how he was persecuted, him and his companions and his relatives. And in these 3 years, the resources that they had was very, very limited. People were going hungry and thirsty because there is no resources for them to live off. The resources that they had was limited and were finishing off. And the Prophet ﷺ was explaining this, and he mentioned how the only thing that he had to eat in a month was what Bilal ibn Rabah radiyallahu anh, what he had in under his ibit, under his arm. Because when they used to go in and out of the shi'b, they made sure that nobody had food or water to bring into the people so they can live off from. But Bilal radiyallahu anh, he would put some of the food under his ibit, under his arm, in order for it to go to the Prophet ﷺ so he can eat it. The city of Mecca is known to be very, very hot. So imagine how that food would have tasted from how hot the weather was. But yet, the Prophet ﷺ was steadfast on his path in the da'wah, to deliver the da'wah of worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal alone and not associating any partners with Him. Another story where Ibn Kathir have narrated in his book Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, that when the Prophet ﷺ have seen how the people of Mecca is refusing his da'wah, is refusing to believe in Allah Azza wa Jal, he went to a nearby city called Taif. And when he presented his da'wah to the leaders, they made fun of him and they cursed him. One of them, one of them have told him that Allah Azza wa Jal, wal-iyadu billah, we seek refuge in Allah from this statement. He said that Allah Azza wa Jal have not found a better man with his da'wah than you. Imagine how the Prophet ﷺ have felt at that moment. He humiliated the Prophet ﷺ, but the Prophet ﷺ was firm. And while he was leaving the city to go back to Mecca, these leaders have told their slaves to make, while the Prophet was walking in the path, to make 2 lines while he was walking, and they threw stones at him. He was the Zayd ibn Haritha radiyallahu anh, his companion, was accompanying the Prophet ﷺ. And while they were throwing their rocks at them, Zayd was trying to protect the Prophet ﷺ right and left. And even to see how he was protecting the Prophet ﷺ, his head was bleeding. And the Prophet ﷺ was also bleeding. But yet, the Prophet ﷺ was steadfast. Even though he was sad from what happened, but he was steadfast. He did not leave the path that he was on. He made sure that he was firm. And he showed his companions how he was firm on this da'wah. And the last story that I will mention, which Imam Bukhari narrated in his Sahih on the authority of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anh, that he mentioned, and listen to this, Oqbah ibn Abi Muait, the one that we mentioned in previous stories, that same man, what he did is, while the Prophet ﷺ was praying, he went behind him with a rope and he tried to choke the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was trying to push him off in order for him to survive, in order for him to save himself. But then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anh, the first believer in the Prophet ﷺ from men, he came and he pushed that man off away from the Prophet ﷺ, and he told him, "Are you attacking a man that he's calling the people towards worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal alone and not associating any partners with Him, calling people upon oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal? Are you attacking such a man?" Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anh was angry. And this was just one of the numerous assassinations, attempts of assassinations that the Prophet ﷺ had to survive. Only for one cause, for serving this deen, for delivering this deen to the whole world. The Prophet ﷺ knew that this deen was not only for the Arabs. This religion was not only for the Arabians, but rather it was for the whole world. Allah Azza wa Jal said in the Quran that the Prophet ﷺ is mercy to human beings and to all creations. Subhanallah. Now looking at all of these stories, we should think and ponder upon ourselves. What have we done to serve this deen? What have we did to show that we're steadfast on this deen? Unfortunately, in the land of the West, we see that people shave off their beards in order for them to not be known as Muslims. We see that some of the sisters take off their hijab so they would not be known as Muslims. When the time of prayer comes, they do not pray. Why? Because they don't want to show people that they're praying. Numerous ways that they do in order for them to hide their identity, to hide that they're Muslims. Is this how the Prophet ﷺ do? Would the Prophet ﷺ be happy in what you're doing? We claim that we believe in the Prophet ﷺ, but unfortunately we do not follow his path. We claim that we love the Prophet ﷺ, but we do not show the whole world how we love our beloved Prophet ﷺ. We saw that in numerous times the Prophet ﷺ was attacked on the news, in social media, in magazines. He was attacked numerous times. But what did we do? Did we show the world that we're angry? Did we post at least in our social media that we're against these actions? Unfortunately, some of us did not do anything. Loving the Prophet ﷺ and following his path is when you actually follow his sunnah. When you actually look and ponder upon his sayings, upon his life, and seeing what he's doing, and seeing how he's steadfast and firm on his deen. We should ponder upon that and try to use this characteristic. Try to make sure that we have this characteristic. To walk off in the streets and show everyone that we're Muslims. To hold on to our identity and not shy away from it. We see how different cultures around the world, they always show their people that they are from this country or this nationality or this race, and they're proud of it. So why we Muslims, the people that have the truth, the people that Allah Azza wa Jal have chosen in order for them to enter Jannah, to enter heaven, why we're not showing this, how we're proud in front of people? Why we're not showing that we're Muslims in front of people? And another step is for the du'at. For the du'at, the preachers that are calling upon Islam. Be proud. When you deliver your da'wah, be proud. Show people how you're proud. Show people that the ones that call upon this deen are the proudest in calling themselves Muslim. This is the way that we should be doing. This is the way that we should be following. And know that the way of the Prophet ﷺ will always lead towards Jannah, will always lead towards heaven. So make sure you follow that path. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.